There are dates that a person carries the way they carry a photograph, not because they have to, but because certain moments earn a permanent place in the memory simply by being what they were. The first meal, the first conversation that ran past midnight, the first evening that felt, even as it was happening, like the beginning of something. Some people keep those dates the way they keep the photographs, carefully, privately, returning to them on the anniversary as a way of touching the original thing. Some people forget them entirely. And when those two people are married to each other, what accumulates in the space between the remembering and the forgetting is not simply a disagreement about dates. It is something considerably more significant than that. Before we go further, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because this is exactly the kind of story that stays with you. Not because it ends in drama or crisis, but because it ends in truth, the specific, quietly devastating truth that can only be delivered by a woman who has been patient for a very long time and has finally found, on a Saturday afternoon on a game show stage, exactly the right moment to stop being patient. Steve Harvey has asked thousands of couples about their marriages on the Family Feud stage. He has heard the polished answers and the unrehearsed ones, the answers that make audiences laugh and the answers that make them go very still. But when a woman named Gloria Mercer stood at that podium in the winter of 2023 and told him, in front of 200 strangers, something that her husband of 21 years had never once been told, Steve Harvey stopped the game, sat down on the edge of the stage, and simply listened. And what he heard changed the temperature of that room for the rest of the afternoon. Gloria Mercer was 54 years old, and she remembered everything. This was not a figure of speech. It was a genuine quality of her attention, a comprehensive, detailed, emotionally indexed memory that had been both a professional asset and a source of private loneliness for most of her adult life. She had grown up in Savannah, Georgia, the only child of a high school history teacher father and a librarian mother, in a household where the past was treated as a living thing, present at the dinner table, available for reference, worthy of careful preservation. Her parents had met on a specific Tuesday in October 1963 and had marked that Tuesday every year for 42 years until her father passed away. The last thing her mother had said at his funeral was the date they had met, stated plainly as a kind of epitaph. Gloria had been 40 years old when she heard her mother say that. She had never forgotten it. She worked as an archivist for a regional historical society in Charlotte, North Carolina, a career that suited her precisely because it formalized the quality she had always possessed naturally. She spent her professional days cataloging, preserving, and giving context to the things that other people had left behind, ensuring that what had happened remained available to those who came after. It was, she had always felt, important work. The past deserved someone in its corner. She had met her husband, Walter Mercer, at a dinner party on the 14th of February, 1999. She remembered the date not because it was Valentine's Day, a coincidence she had always found slightly on the nose, but because of the specific quality of the evening itself. Walter had been seated across the table from her, and he had spent the first hour of the dinner making the rest of the table laugh before turning his full attention to her and asking with genuine curiosity what she did and why she had chosen it. She had talked about her work for 20 minutes, and he had listened with an attention that she later understood was characteristic of him at his best. They had stayed at the table long after everyone else had left. They had married 3 years later. Walter Mercer was 57. He was a civil engineer, practical and methodical in his professional life, with a mind oriented toward structures and systems and the forward management of complex problems. He was not, by his own cheerful admission, a sentimental man. He did not keep photographs in his wallet. He did not write things down in diaries. He had never in 21 years of marriage forgotten a birthday, a school event, or a work obligation, because those things were in his calendar, and his calendar was meticulous. What was not in his calendar was the 14th of February, 1999, because it had never occurred to him to put it there. Gloria had marked that date privately every year for 21 years. She had not made a production of it. She had not presented Walter with a card or a reservation or a reminder. She had simply held it the way she held everything that mattered, quietly, completely, with the undemonstrative faithfulness of a woman who believed that the things worth keeping did not require announcing. She had waited with decreasing confidence for Walter to remember. He never had. This was not the whole of it. The forgotten date was not a wound in isolation. It was the visible edge of something broader, a pattern of asymmetry in what each of them brought to the question of their shared history. Gloria could tell you the restaurant where they had had their first argument and what it had been about and how it had resolved. She could tell you the exact words Walter had used when he proposed, the weather that morning, the song that had been playing in the background. Walter could tell you, with equal precision, the load-bearing specifications of every bridge he had worked on in 3 decades of civil engineering. Their memories were not better or worse than each other's. They were simply oriented in entirely different directions. The Family Feud appearance had been their daughter Maya's idea. Maya was 23, a graduate student in communications, and she had applied to the show as a birthday gift to her parents, a way of celebrating their anniversary year, the 21st, in a form that she thought would make them laugh and give them something to share. Gloria had said yes immediately. Walter had said yes after checking his calendar. Neither of them had anticipated that the day would produce anything other than a good story to tell. Gloria had anticipated something. She had known from the moment Maya described the format, the questions, the on-stage conversation, the way Harvey drew things out of families, that this was the kind of environment in which something true might emerge. She had not planned anything specific, but she had arrived on that stage with the particular readiness of a person who has been waiting for the right container for a feeling they have been carrying for a long time, and who recognizes one when they see it. The Mercer family arrived at the Family Feud studio alongside the Okonkwo family from Baltimore, 4 adult siblings, warm and competitive in equal measure, who had the easy confidence of people who had spent a lifetime being each other's best audience. The 2 families met in the green room, and the contrast between them was affectionate rather than sharp. The Okonkwos were loud with expectation. The Mercers were quieter, pleasanter, the kind of family that moves through shared spaces with the practiced smoothness of people who have been navigating each other for a long time. Walter was in good spirits. He was a man who enjoyed the practical challenge of things, the buzzer timing, the strategy of which family member should play which round, and he had done what he always did with a problem he was interested in. He had prepared. He had watched 12 episodes of Family Feud in the 2 weeks prior to the taping, and had assembled what he called, without irony, a statistical profile of the most common survey answer categories. Gloria had watched him doing this from across their living room and had felt, simultaneously, deep affection for him and a specific weariness that she could not have entirely explained. The first 3 rounds went comfortably for the Mercers. Walter was quick and accurate, his preparation evident in the methodical confidence with which he approached each question. Maya was sharp and funny. She had her mother's memory and her father's pragmatism in a combination that served her extremely well at a game show podium. Gloria answered twice, both times correctly, once landing a top 3 answer that brought the audience to its feet and made her laugh with a pleasure that was, in that moment, completely uncomplicated. Between the 3rd and 4th rounds, Harvey brought the full family together at center stage for the conversational segment. He moved through the Mercer family with his usual unhurried ease, drawing out the details that gave an audience a sense of who they were watching. Walter's engineering career prompted a joke about whether he had applied statistical analysis to the buzzer, which Walter confirmed with such earnest enthusiasm that the audience laughed for a full 10 seconds. Maya's graduate work in communications produced a gentle observation from Steve that she was perhaps the most dangerous person in the building, which she received with the grin of someone who has heard that before and considers it a compliment. Then Steve turned to Gloria. He asked how long they had been married. She told him 21 years. He looked appropriately impressed and asked, as he always asked long-married couples, what the secret was. Gloria smiled. It was a particular kind of smile, warm on the surface, but with something behind it that was not quite sadness and not quite irony, but occupied the territory between the two. The smile of a woman who has been asked a question she knows the real answer to and is deciding in real time how much of it to give. Memory, she said. I think a long marriage runs on memory, on remembering the things that matter, on keeping the story of how you got here. The audience responded warmly. It was a good answer, the kind that sounded wise and simple at the same time. Steve nodded. I like that, he said. He turned to Walter. Walter, what does Gloria remember that you probably should have? It was a playful question, the kind designed to produce a sheepish grin and a joke about a forgotten grocery run or a misremembered anniversary. Walter laughed the easy laugh of a man who is not worried about the question. Honestly. Most things, he said with the self-deprecating comfort of a man who has made this joke before and knows it lands. I married an archivist. She remembers everything. I remember where I put my keys if I'm lucky. The audience laughed. Walter looked satisfied. It was, by every conventional measure, a fine answer. Steve turned back to Gloria. He was still smiling, still in the easy rhythm of a pleasant exchange. What's the one thing you wish he remembered that he doesn't? Gloria looked at Steve. She held the look for perhaps 1 second longer than the question required. Then she said, "The 14th of February, 1999, the night we met. He has never once remembered it in 21 years. She said it without accusation, without theatrical weight, in the clear, even tone of someone stating a fact that has been a fact for a long time and that she has simply, on this particular afternoon, decided to state out loud. The audience went quiet in the specific way of a room that has heard something real unexpectedly, not dramatically quiet, but the particular attentive silence of people who have leaned slightly forward without realizing they have done so. Walter's expression moved through several things in rapid succession. Surprise, a flash of something defensive, and then, as the weight of the number landed, 21 years, never once, something considerably more complicated. He looked at Gloria. She was looking at Steve Harvey with the composed, settled expression of a woman who has said what she needed to say and is entirely at peace with having said it. Steve Harvey was no longer smiling the hosting smile. He was wearing the expression he wore when the show had become something other than a show. He walked to the edge of the stage and sat down on it, a gesture so unhurried and informal that it seemed to change the register of the entire room. He set his microphone on his knee and looked at Gloria. "Tell me about that night," he said. Gloria told him. She told him about the dinner party, about the coincidence of the date, about Walter spending an hour making the table laugh before turning to her with his full attention and asking what she did and why she had chosen it. She told him about the conversation that had run until the restaurant staff were stacking chairs around them, and about the walk to her car afterward that had lasted 45 minutes because neither of them had been willing to be the person who ended the evening. She told it the way an archivist tells a story, with precision and without embellishment, the details exact, the sequence clear, the significance allowed to carry itself rather than being announced. The studio was very quiet throughout. 200 people were listening the way people listen when they understand that something is being given to them, not performed for them, but actually given. When she finished, Steve sat with it for a moment. He looked at Walter. Walter had not moved. His expression had settled into something that was difficult to read from a distance, but that those close to him, Maya, who was standing 10 feet away with her hand pressed to her collarbone, could identify precisely. It was the expression of a man in the process of being genuinely reached, not chastened, not performing remorse, actually reached in the specific place that has to be reached before anything real can change. "Walter," Steve said, his voice was entirely without edge. "Did you know she remembered all of that?" "I knew she remembered things," Walter said. His voice was different from how it had been 10 minutes ago, quieter, the professional confidence absent, something rawer present in its place. "I did not know she remembered it like that." "Do you remember anything about that night?" Steve asked. Walter was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I remember that I did not want to leave. I remember thinking that I had never met anyone who listened the way she listened, like what you were saying actually mattered to her. I remember driving home and thinking, I am going to marry that woman." He said it simply, without performance. In the manner of a man who has retrieved something from a place he had not visited in a very long time and is surprised to find it still there, intact. The audience made a sound, not quite a collective exhale, not quite a sigh, but the sound of 200 people responding simultaneously to a sentence that had arrived with more honesty than they had expected. Gloria looked at Walter. For the first time since the segment had begun, she looked at him directly rather than at Steve Harvey. Her expression had changed. The composed, settled look had not gone, but something had opened in it. The slight, involuntary softening of a person who has just been given something they had stopped expecting. Steve looked between the two of them. He did not speak for a moment. Then he said to Walter, "The 14th of February, 1999, you know it now. You are not going to forget it again." It was not a question. Walter nodded. "No," he said, "I am not." Steve stood up from the edge of the stage. He looked at the audience and then back at the Mercer family, at Walter and Gloria standing beside each other, at Maya, who was crying with the specific, watery smile of someone who arranged something hoping it would go well and received something far better than they planned. "Here is what I want to say to the people in this room and to everyone watching at home," Steve said. 21 years. This woman has held a date in her heart for 21 years. Not as a grievance, not as ammunition. She held it the way you hold something precious, because to her that night was precious. That night was the beginning of her whole story. He paused. And the man who was there for the beginning of that story just told us what he felt that night. He told us he knew he was going to marry her. He looked at them both. "You have been carrying the same night in different ways. Maybe it is time to carry it the same way." The audience responded with the sustained, warm applause of people who have been given something true and are expressing their recognition of it. Walter reached for Gloria's hand. She let him take it. Maya put her arms around both of them from the side, and for a moment the three of them stood together on that stage, a family held inside a moment they had not planned and could not have manufactured, and the room held it with them. The Mercer episode aired 5 weeks after the taping. By the following evening, the clip of Gloria's answer, the date, stated plainly, followed by the 21-year accounting, had been shared 7 million times. It was not the most viewed clip of the season. It was, by a considerable margin, the most discussed. What the discussion revealed was that the clip had struck a nerve that was both specific and universal. Specific, because it named a precise dynamic that many long-married couples recognized. Universal, because the asymmetry of memory in a marriage is one of the less examined but more common sources of distance between partners who love each other, and are nonetheless not quite living inside the same version of their shared story. The response divided interestingly along lines that had less to do with gender than with temperament. People who identified with Gloria wrote about the particular exhaustion of being the keeper of a shared history alone, of holding dates and details and small moments that the other person had let pass without noticing, not because they did not care, but because their minds were simply oriented elsewhere. People who identified with Walter wrote, with varying degrees of discomfort, about the moment of recognition, about watching Walter's face when Gloria named the date and understanding, with an uncomfortable sharpness, that they had someone in their own lives who was carrying something similar. "I have been married for 19 years, one man wrote, and I watched Walter's face when she said that, and I picked up my phone and I texted my wife to ask if there was a date she had been keeping that I had never remembered. She called me immediately. We talked for 2 hours. That has never happened on a Tuesday night." He ended the message with a sentence that was quoted widely in the coverage that followed. "It turns out the date was the 7th of March, 1998. I know it now. I will not forget it." Gloria gave one interview, published 3 months after the episode aired, for a publication focused on long-term relationships and the dynamics of shared life. She was characteristically precise and unhurried throughout, speaking about the experience with the same quality of attention she brought to her archival work. She said that she had not intended the moment as a confrontation. She had intended it as a disclosure, a distinction she considered important. A confrontation, she explained, is directed at the other person and requires something from them. A disclosure is directed at the truth and requires nothing except honesty. She said that she had spent 21 years managing the feeling in private, converting it into something she could live alongside, and that on that Saturday afternoon the right question had been asked at the right moment, and she had simply answered it honestly for the first time. She said something that became the most quoted line from the interview. "I am an archivist. My entire professional life is built on the belief that what happened matters, that the record of things is worth keeping, because it tells us who we are and how we got here. I applied that belief to my work every day for 26 years, and I applied it to my marriage privately for 21. What that afternoon did was bring those two things into the same room. And once they were in the same room, both Walter and I could see them clearly." She said that the conversation she and Walter had that evening, after the taping in the car, and then at a restaurant neither of them had planned to go to and at which they stayed until closing, was the longest unguarded conversation they had had in years. She said Walter had asked her, for the first time, what else she remembered. She said she had told him. She said he had listened with the same quality of attention that had arrested her across a dinner table in 1999, and that she had wondered over the years where it had gone. It had not gone anywhere. It was available when called upon. It had simply not been called upon often enough. Walter gave no formal interview, but he accompanied Gloria to the follow-up segment that Family Feud recorded 3 months after the original airing. A brief update, filmed at their home in Charlotte, that showed the two of them at their kitchen table with a calendar open to February. The 14th was circled. Below it, in Walter's engineer's handwriting, it said simply, "The night we met." The segment was 60 seconds long and was, in the opinion of the show's production staff, among the most quietly effective they had ever produced. Maya, whose gift had set the whole afternoon in motion, said in a brief public statement that she had applied to the show hoping to give her parents a memory. She said she had not anticipated that the day would produce a conversation they had needed to have for 2 decades. She said she was grateful for it, and that she had learned something important about what it meant to really listen to the person you loved, and about the cost, compounded over years, of not listening quite carefully enough. Steve Harvey addressed the episode in an interview conducted several months later. He said that the moment he had sat down on the edge of the stage was the moment he understood that the game was over for the afternoon, not abandoned, but superseded by something that mattered more. He said that Gloria's phrasing had stayed with him. The way she had said the date without accusation, as a plain statement of fact, in the tone of someone who was not asking for anything but was simply, finally, telling the truth. What she was doing, he said, was archiving. She was doing what she does, putting the record straight, making sure what happened was known. And what Walter did when he heard it was the thing that matters, because he could have gone the other way. He could have been defensive. He could have minimized it. Instead, he went back to that night and told us what he had felt, and what he felt was exactly what she had felt, and they had been carrying the same thing separately for 21 years without knowing the other person had it too. He paused. That is the thing about memory in a marriage. You think you are carrying it alone. Sometimes you are both carrying it and neither of you knows the other one has it. The Mercer episode did not produce the most dramatic moment in the show's recent history. It produced something rarer, a moment of genuine reckoning between two people who loved each other and had simply, across 2 decades of a full and busy life, drifted to either side of a silence that neither of them had fully named. The silence had a date. The date was the 14th of February, 1999. And it had taken a game show, a patient archivist, and a man willing to be reached for that date to finally be spoken out loud in a room where both of them could hear it. Gloria Mercer came to Family Feud carrying 21 years of a date that only she had kept. She left having given it to the only other person who had been there for the original evening, the person who had driven home that night certain he was going to marry her, and who had simply, in the accumulation of 21 years of good intentions and forward motion, forgot to mark the place where everything had begun. He marked it now, and the record, as Gloria had always believed it would be, was worth keeping. If Gloria and Walter's story stayed with you, if it reminded you of a date, a moment, or a beginning that deserves to be named, share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do so now. These are the stories that remind us what a shared life is actually made of. We will keep telling them for as long as you are here.